welcome back to my channel. Can y'all see the steam rising? Oh, heck yes. I got some mint tea with me today, and I want to talk about a much discussed, sometimes heated topic within the writing community, and that is fast drafting. If there's one thing I've learned making videos, whether I tried writing like famous authors or any sort of discussion video that prompts a whole lot of conversation in the comments below, it's that we all write differently. Our processes are as unique as the stories that we're attempting to tell. However, I've also learned that a lot of people seem to think that there is one right way. This is so hot. I'm gonna put this down. Okay. Or that someone is doing something wrong if they're not following another writer's expectations. And I should say up front that I do understand how easy it is to kind of fall into this mindset, because I sometimes hear things or watch videos and I'm just like, oftentimes though, I see this side-eyeing of people levied at those who fast draft, which is a hard word to say really quickly. Fast draft. Which maybe actually, now that I think about it, is something that we should define for the sake of this video. And much like everything else and my overall point, I think that a lot of us would define it differently, but for my sake, I'm gonna say writing a novel, often the first draft of a novel, within a month or so. Beginning to end, completed, again, usually a first draft. And we're going to circle around the phenom that is NaNoWriMo toward the end of this discussion. So I decided to pull some receipts for this video. Partially as a way to tell the naysayers shut up, but also just because I'm forever curious how other people write. And this exploration was also prompted by this book, or this author I should say, Ray Bradbury. A lot of y'all will probably know by now that I have read and completed Fahrenheit 451 for my next Cooking with Classics episode. But the thing that I want to point out that I thought was so interesting was actually at the back of the book, there's both a coda and also an after. Is it on that side? No. But also an afterword. And in the afterword, he basically tells the reader how he managed to write Fahrenheit 451, among other really interesting things. But you know, he used to go to the library to write, and he used to rent out a typewriter, and also that he finished the first draft in roughly 9 days. He does mention that that first draft was only about 25,000 words, which is approximately half of what this book ended up being, but still. And quickness is truth is a famous adage that Ray Bradbury coined, along with the sort of idea of blurting out stories. He was big on not thinking, just sort of feeling, doing, writing. And now I haven't read Zen and the Art of Writing, but I do want to. So let's move along, because there's another example, Tahira Mafi, who used to write her drafts in about a week or so. She did this for several books that ended up on the New York Times bestseller list. But something worth noting is that she has been trying to sort of normalize her writing routine to not do what she did for several books, which she speaks on during the First Draft podcast with Sarah Enni, especially after marrying another writer. And this podcast episode was a while ago, but she's also had a child now. So I imagine that just kind of reinforces sort of normalizing something rather than like segmenting herself off and writing nonstop from sun up to sundown, doing nothing but writing, oftentimes even forgetting to eat. Now those two examples, Ray Bradbury and Tahira Mafi, were authors that I'd already heard of being these kind of fast drafters. But in researching this topic, I found a WikiRimo of authors that have fast drafted. So I will link that down below along with, you know, the podcast I mentioned and everything else. But I do want to share a few that stood out to me. For instance, Arthur Conan Doyle wrote what would be the first kind of instance of Sherlock Holmes in 3 weeks. Robert Louis Stevenson wrote or rewrote The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde in only 3 days. And though not technically within the month time period, Anne Rice actually wrote the first draft of Interview with the Vampire in 5 weeks. Now, I purposely gave examples of people who found both commercial success and critical success, or, you know, have their books seen as a classic or read in schools, or just whatever measure of success there is, because I think the main argument I've seen against fast drafting is basically like, how good could it possibly be? How could you write anything good in such a short amount of time? Never mind that just this idea of good is a confusing, complicated one to begin with. And my argument against the good sort of thing is, to paraphrase another popular writing adage, you can't edit what's not there. You have to get words on the page in order to revise, in order to edit, in order for it to be read by others, in order to publish it. Does it really matter how it's done first or how quickly it's done the first time? Writing is rewriting and all of that stuff. Now it's a drinkable temperature. Personally, I think this pushback against fast drafting has kind of grown with the rise of self-publishing, especially because there are already a lot of stigmas attached to certain genres that tend to benefit most from self-publishing, which is so crazy because despite the fact that our EQs are often raised by reading a lot, we can be a very like snobbish bunch. The point being, some genres benefit from a fast release schedule, which at a certain point when you kind of wind it all back, encourages writing quickly. The other issue I see is that, for instance, if I'm given 2 drafts to beta read for people and both of them, let's pretend, are equally bad in the same ways. But if I find out that this writer, it only took 2 weeks for them to write what they gave me, and this writer, it took them 2 years, I will look at the person it only took 2 weeks and tell them that that is potentially the reason that it might not be that good. It's just harder to look at the person it took 2 years to write that and say the same thing, when really it comes down to the draft just not being ready regardless of the time spent writing it. We get into this weird loop where time doesn't necessarily equate to quality. However, for a single project, more time could potentially increase the quality of the output. But then, of course, we get back to the fact that it's a first draft. Most people who fast draft are not necessarily doing a fast revision. They're fast drafting the first draft. Oh, fast draft the first draft. Again, who cares how it got onto the page first? Now, I do want to circle back in NaNoWriMo to this discussion. I think it's true for a lot of things that as the popularity of something kind of increases, the group of people that don't like it will also become more vocal. This is true for books themselves, bands, sports teams, and writing processes. I think the quick caveat I'd like to add in here is that a lot of people come out of NaNoWriMo having finished a story and not realizing how much more it takes to then make something of quality. Sometimes this is people's first encounter or like leap into writing, and they simply don't know. That can give a bad name for something if people are trying to show people all their 0 drafts, their crap drafts, or even worse, attempting to publish or query these sorts of things. But that's not an issue with fast drafting as a process itself. Now, is any of this to say that fast drafting is the best method? No. In fact, I think that's my entire point. There's not a singular perfect method that every writer will fit into, and as a lot of us eventually experience, sometimes your process is different for each genre or even each novel. Writing is a freaking whirlwind. But I do think that's gonna be it from me. Please do comment down below. I would love to hear about the different writing processes that you've tried in the past. What have you sort of taken and incorporated into your own process? Or even tell me about a time when you attempted to write something one way and then tried to do it again, but it didn't work for that book. And of course, let me know what you think about fast drafting. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you all very soon with a new video. Bye! I think that's because, to paraphrase and I think fast drafting is what have you kind of taken as your own, incorporated into your routine, or what have